Good evening. Thank you to my wonderful audience here this evening, which includes via FaceTime our other classmates, three of them to be exact, Corey, Hannah, and Ariel in the background. So we have a total of 7 people here tonight, and my topic this evening is actually going to be on the participants within the Middle East peace talks. And so before we dive into anything related to the peace process and all the conversations and the contracts that have been involved with that, it's important to know who is involved and what their ideologies are, because it's important to understand that so we can have a clear understanding of why they feel entitled to certain things and certain rights as different nations. And so my first question here this evening is, who has heard of a term, peace in the Middle East? Raise your hands. Okay, so we have some people here and waving of fingers on camera. And so, but some of us here have not. And so it's actually important for us to have a good understanding of that part. And so my goal this evening is just to give you a brief overview of that. So we're going to start with the nation of Israel. And the nation of Israel is actually established back in the book of Genesis. Yeah, a little Bible college humor for you, not so much. It's important for us to understand that, though, as believers, because it does play into whether or not they are actually established as a divine nation by God. And that is something that does come up in conflict with a lot of the other views throughout the world. And obviously it plays a huge factor in our eschatology and what we believe in that part. So the nation of Israel was actually established within one day, and it was President Harry Truman who was the first one to acknowledge them as an official nation. And it was shortly after, if we can go back through biblical times, it was shortly after the death of Jesus when the nation was scattered throughout the ends of the earth as prophesied in Scripture. And when they were brought back, it was actually Great Britain who helped usher them back into their homeland. And at the time, they were known as Palestine. And on May 15th of 1948, when they were actually brought back together as a nation within one day, they fulfilled a very important scripture found in the book of Isaiah in chapter 66, verses 7 and 8. And it talks about the nation being reborn within one day. And so that's very important for us to understand, like I said, simply because it goes into where we stand as Christians, especially right now regarding the Middle East and all the different things going on in that region right now. The next participant in our list is the PLO. The PLO is actually short for the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and they were established back in 1964. And they were established with the stance of direct opposition to Israel. And the reason for it is because they are the ones who were also there when Great Britain were ushering the Jews back into their homeland. And so one thing that's important to remember is that within their charter, there are certain articles in particular that as a nation they have decided to take firm official stances against the Jews and against the nation of Israel in general. For example, I want to read you one particular article of their charter, which is Article 19. This is important to remember. Zionism is a colonialist movement in its inception, aggressive and expansionist in its goal, racist in its configurations, and fascist in its means and aims. Israel, in its capacity as the spearhead of its destructive movement and as the pillar of colonialism, is a permanent source of tension and turmoil in the Middle East in particular, and to the international community in general. So you can tell by that verbiage, by the general wording going on there in their official charter as a nation, that they are firm in their belief that Israel has no place on this earth. And so, I mean, just the very wording, Zionist is a colonialist movement in its inception, that goes directly against what Scripture has told us in the ordained divine right of the land to the nation of Israel by God. And so that's something that we need to keep in mind when we're talking about who has land rights, who deserves what, and who actually was there first It's a major controversial point right now. And so the next key group that I want to discuss with you actually is Hezbollah. Hezbollah, I'm sure you've all heard at some point within the news, is a terrorist organization, and they are very tied in with the Palestinian Authority, and they were established back in 1982, and their official manifesto, though, was actually established in February of 1985, sometime later. They're located out of southern Lebanon, and they were established by Iran, which is important to remember when trying to figure out who believes what. And Iran, as you know, firmly believes that Israel needs to be, quote, wiped off the map. And that's especially important for us to think about when we start taking stances as to who deserves what and who really is actually trying to seek peace and things like that. So none of us is meant to actually persuade you guys in either direction, but it's important for us to be aware of the ideologies and what actually is aligned with Scripture and what goes directly against it. And so I'm going to end my discussion there, and my hope for this evening is that knowing the things that you know now about the different participants within the peace talks, it'll actually spur you all on to go and do some further research, because right now, with all the turmoil going on in today's news, there are various different media wars going on, and there are sometimes outright lies or sometimes little exaggerations, and you need to know where you stand biblically and what is actually scriptural as Christians. It does play an important role in our eschatology. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you again to my wonderful audience, and y'all have a great evening.